This is week 3 of the 4th annual Read What You Own challenge. How am I doing? Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am a co-host for the 4th annual Read What You Own challenge. This was created by the evil mastermind Criminally. I am joined by 2 other co-hosts, MJ at Reading This Life and Crystal at Fiber Artsy. Criminally created this event to read 100 books that he already owned before buying another book, and fools like myself joined along. And I'm still joining along 4 years later. The rules over the years have changed a bit. This year we are introducing page counts instead of book counts. So instead of the 100 book challenge, I'm going to be doing the 25,000 page challenge that I must read before buying another book. I am going to link a video in the description of this one so you can get a little more details on the rules, and be warned, every person doing this challenge has a little bit different rules. A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, originally published in 1977, 291 pages long. Philip K. Dick is one of the great masters of science fiction from the 20th century. He is also a very odd writer and a rather unusual dude. In real life, he was messed up. He was a very heavy drug user. And A Scanner Darkly is essentially about drug use. There is a future society where police officers wear these things called scramble suits that sort of makes it impossible for people to tell who you really are. And he is investigating a drug dealer called Bob Actor. And this police officer's name is Fred. And Fred wears the scramble suit, so no one can really see who he is. And he has placed hidden video cameras in the house where Bob Arctor lives, because he wants to nail Bob Arctor, because Bob Arctor is a drug dealer of this drug called Substance D. Substance D is just short for substance death. And he's going to catch this drug dealer. There's only one problem. In order to be an effective undercover police officer investigating drug users, you occasionally have to take the drugs yourself, or so says Fred. And it becomes quite clear that there is something very seriously wrong with Fred. In fact, it's not a huge spoiler. Fred is actually Bob Arctor, the man he is investigating. And while, yes, this is science fiction, this is more about the damages that drugs can do to a person and how it affects your personality. There is an afterwards of this novel where Philip K. Dick lists about a dozen people that he knew in real life who either died from drugs or had their brains scrambled from drugs. Is it just a science fiction novel? No. This is really, as I said, an investigation of what drugs can do to the human mind. But it is still a pretty darn good novel. Ward 6 by Anton Chekhov, originally published in 1892. It is 50 pages long. There is a facility out in rural Russia in the late 19th century. It is an insane asylum. It is known as Ward 6. There are a few inmates. And a doctor, also a rural doctor, is assigned to treat the inmates of this insane asylum. And he starts a conversation with one of them. The inmate used to be a civil servant who just went nuts. But the civil servant is actually a rather intelligent man who likes to discuss the philosophy of skepticism. And the doctor engages with him. They like to talk. And part of this book is just their conversations. But apparently, this doctor buys more books than he should. There is a line in here that says 50% of his income goes to books. And the doctor, well, financially, he's in trouble. And mentally, the doctor is in trouble. This is a very dark short story about what can happen to the human mind. I liked this story much more than I liked the Anton Chekhov plays. I have been participating in Chekhov Ambler, where the first 2 weeks we read 2 plays by Anton Chekhov, and now in the latter half of the month we are moving on to his short stories. I much, much prefer the short stories. Cover Her Face by P.D. James, originally published in 1962, 305 pages long in the print edition. I listened to the audio book. There is an estate in England. It is outside of London, somewhere in the countryside. The family is, of course, rather wealthy. They have servants, and one of the servants they hired as a maid is named Sally. She is an unwed mother. During this time, being an unwed mother was really a bit of a scandal. If a woman had a child out of wedlock, she was falling under suspicion. But this family wanted to do the right thing and hired her as a maid. However, the family was giving a party one evening where all their friends were in attendance, and suddenly this maid comes in. She's wearing a dress identical to one of the women who is prominent in the family. And the woman comes up to her and says, "Aren't you rather being presumptuous wearing that dress?" And she says, "No, because your son has proposed marriage to me." Now, no one suspected that their son, who was a doctor, would be proposing marriage to Sally. And it was a bit of a shock that evening. And in the morning, Sally did not come out of her room, and they had to bust down the room because it was locked, and she was dead, murdered, strangled. So there you start the beginning of this murder mystery. This is the first of the Adam Dalgliesh Inspector series, where Dalgliesh has to uncover who committed this murder. Now, true to form in these type of murder mysteries, Adam Dalgliesh is interviewing everyone in the house who is at least a potential suspect. And all these potential suspects are probably not telling Adam Dalgliesh the whole truth when they're talking to him. And it's up to the reader to follow along with Dalgliesh and find out who the murderer is. Now, I think this is a rather quaint mystery. I don't know if I'd call it a cozy mystery, but it follows that murder in the English countryside format that's so popular with some mystery authors. I did like this book a lot. I did read it a number of years ago, probably in the late 90s. So when I was listening to this audiobook, I had completely forgotten who the murderer was. And was it a surprise? Well, no, not exactly. I was following along well enough. My brain may have remembered enough, but still, I enjoyed this mystery. It's a very slow burn mystery. You will not find a whole lot of action in this book. There's really just one murder, and it was possibly poisoning, but definitely some strangulation, and I can highly recommend it. Epitaph for a Spy by Eric Ambler, published in 1938, 261 pages long. Joseph Váci is a Hungarian refugee who is effectively stateless. He is a teacher of languages. He is hoping to get his French citizenship. While on holiday in the south of France, he sends a roll of film to be developed. Váci is an amateur photographer, and all of a sudden, the police summon him in for questioning. They use the cover that there is an issue with his passports, because I said he is Hungarian, who was originally born in Yugoslavia, and they said effectively stateless. And the police show him the photographs that he sent to be developed. There are 8 photographs of lizards, which Vadsy took himself, and then there are some other photographs of some military equipment, which Vadsy has no knowledge of taking whatsoever. It becomes clear that something happened in this bed and breakfast where Vadsy was staying, and someone used his camera to photograph this military equipment. And the police want Vadsy to uncover who is the person who took the actual photographs. And Vadsy is a bumbling fool. The police know he's a bumbling fool, but that's the tool that they have to work with. And this is rather an interesting spy novel because, yes, there is a spy, the person who took the photographs, but the main character, he's just a teacher of languages, bumbling around trying to uncover what has happened. And I really thought this was an excellent little espionage novel. It's a little bit different take than you normally do because you do not get the story from the spy's perspective. You get the person who is going to be criminally prosecuted if he cannot uncover who the true culprit is. It was very easily written. It felt very clean, very smooth. As Mark at Book Time with Elvis says, it could almost be a contemporary novel. It's just that smoothly written. And Mark really loved this book. He called it a corker. I'm going to say it doesn't quite live up to that standard in my opinion, but this is an excellent book nonetheless. And I do want to read other Eric Ambler books. He was at one time one of the really well-known writers of espionage. Night by Elie Wiesel, originally published in French in 1960 and 148 pages long. This is the autobiography of Elie Wiesel, who was an inmate in the German concentration camps. He was a Romanian Jew. And this is an extremely powerful memoir. I think this is the 3rd time that I have read it over a lifetime. In the introduction to this edition, Wiesel talks a bit how in the early part of Germany just wanted to make sure that there was no room for the Jews in Germany, and how that later accelerated to exterminating them. And unfortunately, as I was reading this, it came to my mind that in the United States, we have this prevailing opinion from at least one half of the country that this country has no room for illegal immigrants and that we need to do something about it. Now, what's going to happen in the United States with the illegal immigrants, I don't know. I hope it does not go anywhere close to the experiences that Elie Wiesel describes in this memoir. But the horrifying thing is that America, the United States, has hate in its heart for certain people. And the Germans, during the 40s, when this book takes place, had hate in their heart for the Jews. That hatred is just the same in the 40s as it is in the 2020s. Such a terrible thing to see coming from my fellow human species. Large portions of this book deal with Elie Wiesel dealing with his faith, his struggle to understand how a God could allow his people to suffer so much. And if a God allowed that to happen, is he a just God, or is there no God at all? I think most people should read this book sometime in their lives. I would definitely assign it to high school students, just so they know history, what happened to the Jewish people in the 40s, and the extreme suffering that they experienced at the hands of others who hated them for no other reason that they were Jewish. Perhaps that would change some people's mind, or perhaps it would not. This book is frequently banned, I assume because some people don't want their children learning about the hatred in some people's hearts. They want to say that, oh, that's no problem at all. Don't read this book. I say, read this book. Even if you have read it before, I think it is well worth a second look, especially if you're living in the United States. And we may be heading towards some dark times ourselves, where our hatred is going to overcome us. The Collected Fictions of Jorge Luis Borges. I have promised myself to read one short story from this volume per week while listening to the audiobook. I got a little bit ahead of myself this week because the short stories in this section are really rather short. They're 6 to 4 pages long. I described them earlier as written in sort of a non-fiction style. And I noticed that there is, after this section, a note on the sources, and that all the stories that I have been reading so far are actually based on real people. Now, some of these real people are rather obscure to my American education, but when he started the story about Billy the Kid, I've heard about the story of Billy the Kid before, and that got me down to exploring the notes in this book, where I learned that the stories so far, yeah, they've been based on real people. And that actually changed my opinion a bit. I'd said they were rather sort of not up to snuff to what Borges would write in his later life, and why I do think that is still true. I'm beginning to appreciate them more. And this week, I read a number of them. The Widow Chang, Pirate, Monk Eastman, Purveyor of Iniquities, The Disinterested Killer, Bill Harrigan. He was Billy the Kid. The Uncivil Teacher of Court. That was based in Japan. And then Hakim, the Masked Dyer. So those are the stories I read, and it was 6 pages, 4 pages, 5 pages, and 5 pages. So I'm getting up there. I'm glad I decided to read these biographical short stories in bulk rather than spreading them out over a number of weeks. I would actually think that you would want to read all of them in 1 or maybe 2 days because they work better as a whole for some reason. And I like them more now than I did when I was just reading them individually. Okay, that is a wrap. How did I do? I read 1,082 pages. That brings my total for the challenge to 3,541 pages, or 14.16% finished. Now, I have been listening to a rather long audiobook during this week. I thought about calculating out how many pages of that book that I finished, but I decided I'm just going to count the pages when I actually finish it. What that sort of means is that this week is a little low on the page count, and next week, if I finish that audiobook, my page count is going to be a little higher than usual. But I think that is going to be the best way to deal with audiobooks. I am also about to begin some very long reading projects with long books. And in those physical books or digital books, I think I will break out the pages into its weekly parcels, because it's much easier to say that I read 155 pages of this book when I can just look at the page count and count it up for the week, then try to calculate the hours of an audiobook and transform them into pages. Well, that's my plan for now. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.